Chapter 170, Eternal Damnation. Xu Qing didn't speak. He didn't have the habit of chatting too much during a battle. Almost at the instant the Diamond Sex ancestor retreated, the flight talisman on his leg suddenly shone. At the next instant, his figure was like a rainbow as he tore through the air and rushed toward the Diamond Sex ancestor. He instantly got close. As he got close, the boss shadow behind him manifested. Its sinister appearance was so chapped that it seemed to contain magma. The instant it appeared, heat spread in all directions, causing the snowflakes in a large area to melt into rain and fog. His Qi and blood were stimulated to the extreme. He circulated the mountains and seas art with all his might, causing his body refinement technique to be maintained at its peak at this moment. He arrived in front of the Diamond Sex ancestor and punched ruthlessly. Killing intent flashed in the eyes of the Diamond Sex ancestor. With a wave of his hand, the guardian warrior shadow under him roared at the sky and punched back. This confrontation between the two sides that didn't hold anything back caused a booming explosion to ring in all directions. Xu Qing was pushed back and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. In terms of pure body refinement, he was still inferior to the Diamond Sex ancestor's foundation-building body. However, the Diamond Sex ancestor didn't feel good either. The Qi and blood in his body churned, and he similarly retreated. His expression was ferocious, but it hid deep horror. He had completely recognized Xu Qing, but the more he recognized him, the more intense the shock in his heart. Although he had guessed that the kid would become stronger quickly, he still didn't expect that in less than a year, the other party had gone from being chased by him to attacking his sect. Moreover, the changes in his strength before and after were too great. The Diamond Sex ancestor's breathing was hurried. He wanted to say something, but what awaited him was the cruelty in Xu Qing's eyes as he suddenly rushed over. Booming sounds erupted once again. Xu Qing's attacks were too fast and he didn't slow down or pause at all. When he got close, he punched out again and again. In fact, it was the same for his legs. They would occasionally sweep out, and his forehand was also his weapon, which he used to slam the ancestor if he was close enough. The vicious attacks did not give the Diamond Sex ancestor time to take a breath. He was suppressed and was being pushed back. This increased his shock even more. The guardian warrior shadow under him even showed signs of collapse. "You're courting death." The Diamond Sex ancestor let out a low roar and quickly performed a series of hand seals with both hands. Immediately, the magic aperture in his body circulated and the aura of the foundation-building cultivator rose again, forming a pressure that suppressed Xu Qing. As he performed a series of hand seals, a dazzling golden light appeared behind him. This golden light transformed into a whip that lashed out fiercely at Xu Qing. Even the space seemed to explode at the touch of this whip. The boss shadow behind Xu Qing roared and emitted a large amount of fiery aura. When it came into contact with the whip, an astonishing sound rang out. Although the boss shadow didn't collapse when it came into contact with the whip and even grabbed it, the impact formed by the foundation-building magic power still caused Xu Qing's entire body to tremble, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flew back and fell toward the sect gate. The eyes of the sect master and the three elders revealed killing intent. The other disciples were the same. Their gazes were filled with hatred as they all rushed in the direction Xu Qing had fallen and quickly attacked. Died. The eyes of the Diamond Sex ancestor in the air were also red and filled with killing intent. He quickly performed a series of hand seals with both hands. Another foundation-building spell formed. It was a huge Dao seal that manifested in the sky. It was a few hundred feet in size, and the wind and snow moved away from it on their own. It carried an astonishing aura as it pressed down on the falling Xu Qing. The commotion was so great that even the Diamond Sex sect gate trembled. The surrounding snowflakes shattered into powder and scattered in all directions. A cold glint flashed in the eyes of the Diamond Sex ancestor. His hands formed a seal and he waved them out. In an instant, two phantoms that were similar to the guardian warrior beneath him appeared around him and punched out at the same time. Three guardian warrior shadows punched toward Xu Qing from three directions. If it was any other Qi condensation cultivator, even if they were at the great circle of perfection, they wouldn't be able to withstand all of this. Foundation-building spells themselves possessed powerful strength, and the magic apertures also had a powerful effect. To a certain extent, this was equivalent to 7 to 8 talismans being used at the same time. Just as the attacks of the Diamond Sect disciples, the punches of the three guardian warrior shadows, and the large seal above were about to land on the falling Xu Qing. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. He performed a series of hand seals with both hands, and an astonishing spirit energy fluctuation erupted from his body. This fluctuation continued to expand outwards, and in the blink of an eye, it reached nearly 1,000 feet and transformed into a spirit sea. It suddenly exploded outwards with an astonishing aura. As it exploded, it directly formed a terrifying force that swept in all directions. The cultivation levels of the sect master, elders, and disciples below were no different under Xu Qing's spirit energy bombardment. In an instant, their bodies trembled violently and they collapsed in unison. Wherever the spirit energy force swept by, mountains rumbled and buildings shattered. Everyone was destroyed in body and spirit. As for the spell cast by the Diamond Sex ancestor, under the eruption of the spirit sea, rumbling sounds filled the sky. The three guardian warrior shadows instantly blurred, like afterimages flowing through the wind, dissipating quickly. It was the same for the large seal in the sky. As it landed, it seemed to have encountered a violent whine and gradually disappeared. The expression of the Diamond Sex ancestor changed drastically. He had retreated far away, but he was still affected. Fresh blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth again, and the injuries in his body worsened. At the same time, his left arm was covered by the shadow again. Although he barely dodged it, his entire left arm was greenish-black, and the anomalous substances that invaded it were extremely dense. There was also a black iron stick that whistled over and directly pierced through his right shoulder. Other than that, what caused his heart to tremble even more at this moment was that he sensed that his blood and Qi were unstable, and signs of poisoning appeared in his body. His expression turned extremely gloomy. He quickly took out a medicinal pill and swallowed it. He immediately retreated further away. However, his gaze was fixed on Xu Qing, who had landed in the shattered diamond sect, revealing intense killing intent. The spirit sea formed by the 7th peak sea transformation arc can indeed shake a foundation-building cultivator, and it erupts in one go. However, it can only be done once. "You're dead meat no." Xu Qing's breathing was hurried. There was a talisman shining outside his body, but he still spat out a large mouthful of blood. However, there was no surprise on his face. He was already very clear about how powerful foundation-building cultivators were when he arrived, and he still felt that he could kill him. Hence, the moment he attacked, he used his strongest killing move. Regardless of whether it was the heavenly saber, shadow, or Ba shadow, even the spirit sea in his body, he used all of them ruthlessly. This was especially so for poison. From the moment he attacked until now, he had used a total of 73 types. At this moment, everything was in line with his plan. Hence, the instant the Diamond Sex ancestor's expression turned cold, Xu Qing lifted his right hand and grabbed fiercely at the Diamond Sex ancestor, who was retreating in the sky. The eyes of the Diamond Sex ancestor suddenly narrowed. The countless snowflakes in his surroundings suddenly turned into water droplets. At a glance, the range of these water droplets had reached 1,000 feet. Why do you still have spirit energy?" The instant the Diamond Sex ancestor lost his voice in horror, the water droplets in an area of 1,000 feet rapidly fused and directly transformed into a large hand that grabbed fiercely at the Diamond Sex ancestor. The Diamond Sex ancestor spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body retreated rapidly. While great waves were churning in his heart, the 1,000-foot-long hand formed by the water droplets changed their form and transformed again into the appearance of a plesiosaur. This was none other than Xu Qing's forbidden sea dragon whale. It roared at the sky and ruthlessly bit at the Diamond Sex ancestor. The expression of the Diamond Sex ancestor completely changed as he cried out involuntarily. Forbidden sea dragon whale. He had some understanding of the 7 blood eyes and knew that after cultivating the 7th peak sea transformation art to the 8th level, some outstanding people could form the forbidden sea dragon whale. The dragon whale was equivalent to the cultivator's second vessel that stored spirit energy. However, such people were rare. He had also seen forbidden sea dragon whales before. However, although the aura of Xu Qing's dragon whale was the same, regardless of its appearance or the power of the forbidden sea contained in it, it gave him a completely different feeling. Amidst his drastic change in expression, the Diamond Sex ancestor retreated once again. He didn't want to fight anymore. The anomalous substances in his body were now dense, and he was unable to neutralize the poison in his body immediately. Moreover, The poison outbreak was becoming more severe, causing his internal organs to feel a piercing pain. When he spat out blood, it carried a black stench, as though his internal organs were corroding and melting. "If I can activate the mystic brilliance form," the diamond sex ancestor let out a low roar in his heart, filled with unwillingness and helplessness. As for the bizarre shadow hidden in the surroundings, they caused his heart to skip a beat. If he wasn't careful, the amount of anomalous substances would increase again after coming into contact with them. This was especially so when just the forbidden sea dragon whale and Xu Qing's body refinement power were enough to make him feel an intense life and death crisis. "I'm a follower of the Lichu sect," the diamond sex ancestor shouted. However, before he could finish speaking, the flight talisman on Xu Qing's body flickered. Once in the air, Xu Qing calmly spoke. "It's about time." This was the first thing he said since the battle began. Before the diamond sex ancestor could react, Xu Qing waved his hand coldly. Immediately his magic boat rumbled out. The boat that was hundreds of feet tall had a sinister appearance like the black tortoise. There were also sails that were like wings, causing the magic boat that appeared in the air to reveal indescribable cruelty. As the golden light on the ship flashed and gathered on the sharp spike at the bow, a divine intent actually erupted from the magic boat and locked onto the diamond sex ancestor. This divine intent was like a god, causing the wine and snow in the surroundings to instantly dissipate. An astonishing pressure descended. As for Xu Qing, who was standing on the magic boat, he was like the ruler who controlled the god. He looked coldly at the diamond sex ancestor and lifted his right hand. As he lifted his hand, the convergence of divinity became increasingly intense. Clearly, as long as he put down his hand, the divine power attack would erupt. Divine attack, this was his magic boat's strongest move. Originally, Xu Qing planned to use it immediately, but he was worried that he wouldn't be able to kill a foundation-building cultivator who was at his peak and uninjured with a single strike. That was why he personally took action and waited until now. He finally felt that the time was ripe and took it out to ensure that he could kill in one strike. The expression of the diamond sex ancestor was unprecedentedly pale. His scalp felt like it was about to explode, and his eyes revealed extreme disbelief as he cried out involuntarily. Divinity. The bitterness in the sex ancestor's heart also churned endlessly, transforming into horror. At this moment, the life and death crisis had already become infinitely intense. Every part of his flesh and blood seemed to be trembling and screaming under the power of divinity, constantly reminding him of the arrival of death. "I can't escape. If I was in my peak state, I might have a chance." Now the diamond sex ancestor was in despair. He looked at Xu Qing, who was standing on the magic boat, and recalled the ancient books he had read before. He hurriedly shouted, "Fellow Taoist, wait a moment. Listen to me. I'm willing to be your slave. I'm willing to be your slave for the rest of my life. You will be my master, I." Xu Qing's expression was cold and he didn't bother with it. He didn't have the hobby of taking in slaves. He suddenly lowered his right hand,